And now, the top five.
We're going to do this every single show, our top five of the week. And the first topic we want to do, I think, is a good one. We want to talk about who are our top five centers of all time. I want you to start off with your number five. Who's number five for you?
I have to go with Hakeem the Dream Olajuwon. Guy won 2 titles, carried that Houston team, back-to-back titles. Yeah, you can give the whole Jordan retired, blah, blah, blah. Arguably, the Bulls would have won 8 straight, but Olajuwon was just amazing. From the moment he entered the league, he changed basketball in Houston. He's my number 5.
I have Hakeem number 5 as well. A couple reasons. One, you say, yeah, there's the argument of, yeah, when Jordan was out of the league, he won championships. You can also look at it this way. The second Jordan got out of the league, the whole thing was up for grabs, and Hakeem Olajuwon proved that he was the second best player of that era because they won back-to-back championships. He had the best footwork, I think. He was the most skilled offensive big man, I think, in the history of the game.
No question.
There's a great clip online where he just absolutely abuses David Robinson, a Hall of Fame player, in the post. Hakeem Olajuwon's my number 5 as well.
Yeah.
Let's get to number 4.
Gotta go with Hakeem. Number 4, I don't know. I was really debating whether to put him higher, but I have him at number 4, and that's Shaq. I was debating with my number 3 guy, and I had them at 3 and 4, and I just thought, I think Shaq dominated, but he dominated in an era, in that three-peat Lakers era, where there just wasn't that much competition. The centers of the 90s had gone, and him and Kobe just completely annihilated oppositions. There was no competition.
Yeah, you're right. There wasn't even like a number 3 option on those teams, and they were just about unbeatable.
Exactly. The Lakers completely dominated. I mean, the Spurs put up a bit of a fight, but David Robinson was past his prime by then. And yeah, so I have to go with Shaq at number 4, even though I love those Lakers teams.
See, I had Shaq at number 3, and I'll explain it in a second. My number 4 was Wilt Chamberlain.
See, that was my number 3. And I was debating where to put them at 3 and 4. So
well, perfect. So that means we can talk about both of them.
Yeah, there you go.
I think Wilt has become it's weird because so few people have seen him play because the NBA wasn't really televised back then, and it's been a long time. And Wilt's kind of legacy has outgrown who he kind of was as a player because we've now become so stat driven. We look at that 100-point game. We look at seasons where he averaged 40 points and 20 rebounds, and we say, how is this guy not one of the greatest players of all time? He is, but the fact of the matter is Wilt Chamberlain still got traded twice in his prime, which would have never happened to a guy like Bill Russell. He was a guy who routinely was the best player on 500 or below teams. He had Jerry West and Elgin Baylor for a number of years and could never win a championship with those 3. He didn't win a championship until the last year when he basically decided to stop caring about himself. Wilt Chamberlain was so obsessed with his own statistics that he sacrificed the rest of his team in favor of it. So while his stats are great, that's all he is to me. He's a guy who collected great stats because he wasn't a great winner. He went up time and time again against some of the best of his era and came up short. Wilt Chamberlain's my number 4. 3 for Shaq. I'm with you there. I do think Shaq, though, would have dominated in any era he would have played in, though. He played against Ewing, against Hakeem. He played against all those guys in the 90s and was just as good. Now, he didn't win championships, but, I mean, when Shaq was in his prime, he was as dominant as any player I've ever seen down low.
Yeah, I think I was just a little nostalgic. I guess I saw the 100-point game and I was like, the guy who scored 100 points, I can't have him as number 4. I have to have him as number 3. And he had those great battles with Russell. And I think ultimately there was just that competition. That was more of the competition with Chamberlain and then Kareem coming in earlier, like late in Wilt's career. And I just think there was that competition, that's proper centers, and with Shaq, it was just I 3-peat team, and I think there was absolutely zero competition, and I think that's what I based my rationale on for this selection.
I guess, but you also have to remember Wilt Chamberlain played in an era where there was like 8 teams in the entire NBA. Like 8 teams in the entire. So he had a 1 in 8 chance every year of winning the championship, and he could only do it one time. Meanwhile, Shaq was playing in a 30-team league, won it 3 times in a row, then won a 4th one in Miami a couple years later. I like Shaq better than Wilt. I mean, as I said, Wilt was an all-time great for the numbers he put up, but the era he played in, also the 1960s, that season where he put up 100 points, that was the same year where Oscar Robertson averaged like 35, 14, and 13. Numbers were completely out of whack. I think it was the 1962 season, and it's across the board with just about everybody who played that season. Their numbers are crazy. So, it's impressive, but I do think there's a context to it all. Let's get to your number 2.
Well, just a little side note before that. I think I know the way we can decide that. They should have a free throw shooting competition between Wilt and Shaq. Number 2, I have. Did that get there a little late?
A little bit.
Oh, okay. There's like a delay in the feed. Okay. Well, my number 2 is Bill Russell.
Number 2 is Bill Russell.
Oh yeah.
Okay. I want to hear this.
11 championships, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah, 11. Well, anyways, was anchored to that defense. He was just the glue guy. The guy was a player coach.
True.
But he just didn't offensively. Did he do it offensively?
Well, I mean, averaged 18 points a game for his career. He wasn't a stiff guy. He wasn't Kendrick Perkins down there. I mean, he could play. He also had. There were scores on those Boston's teams. He didn't have to do all the scoring on the inside.
I think ultimately my anti-Celtics
bias coming through.
Came in a little bit, but to go with the all-around game of the number 1.
So you like Kareem number 1?
Oh yeah. For the iconic skyhook, for the 5 championships, and just all-around game. The guy played defense, dominant on offense, the most unguardable shot in the history of the NBA, and the all-time leading point scorer in NBA history.
And that's why I had him over Shaq. I was actually debating between Shaq and Kareem for my number 2 spot.
Really?
I was Russell's number 1 for me. Look, greatest defensive player in the history of the game by a mile. Also a complete leader. When you want to talk about intangibles, he was a guy who literally, I hate the term all he does is win, but I mean that's what the guy did. He was in charge of teams who were very good, but frankly, again, Elgin Baylor, Jerry West, and Wilt Chamberlain, that's as much talent as the Celtics had with him and Sam Jones and KC Jones and some of the other players. They had Bob Cousy, but the big difference was that they won every single time, and it wasn't necessarily because they had more talent. It was simply because they were better in bigger games. They were a more mentally together team, and it all started with Bill Russell. The other thing is this. Bill Russell would have never in a million years ever been trade bait in his prime. He was the most untouchable player of his generation. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar got traded midway through his career, in his prime, from Milwaukee to L.A. Bill Russell was absolutely unmovable, and that's why he's my number 1. I mean, Kareem's great. Kareem also dominated in the weakest era of NBA basketball ever, the 1970s. And in the 1980s, he was, I think, the second best player on those Showtime Laker teams behind Magic Johnson. So Kareem's great, and he accumulated a ton of statistics. But look, Karl Malone, I believe, is the number 2 scorer of all time. So I don't take too much consideration into that number.
No, I mean, like, you make very valid points, but like I said, I just have to go with Kareem and my 1980s Lakers. And he won a championship in 71, I think, with the Bucks.
Yeah.
Like in his second year in the league. Yes, he had Oscar Robertson. Oscar Robertson was past his prime. He was just a young pup coming into the league, and he won MVP honors. 3. I think he won 3. No, he won more than 3, didn't he?
Yeah, I think so. I think he won more than 3.
I think he won more than 3 MVPs.
He was the best player in the 1970s by a mile. It was
and you forget in the first 2 championships with Magic, he was still the focus.
Yeah.
In 85, the focus began to shift into Magic's team.
Okay.
80 and 82, that was still Kareem's team.
It is funny though. We look back at this top 5 centers. I'm not sure that list is ever going to get touched. To be honest with you, like I don't think we're ever going to see a center who eclipses those top 5 ever again.
It's a point guards league now, no question about it. So I mean, it's just I don't think so either. We're never gonna have that I mean, maybe years from now, again, the trend will come back, but those dominant big man back to the basket centers, they just don't exist anymore.
So next week we got the Super Bowl, but we'll be back the week after that. Sound good?
Yeah, that sounds good.
We'll see how the Celtics do if they've traded Garnett and Pierce by then.
Yeah, we'll be closer to the trade deadline. We'll talk trades and also
Yeah.
a little.
What about our All-Star picks? We didn't get to talk about that today. We'll talk about that in 2 weeks.
Okay, we'll do that.
Sounds good.
Just and a little leaving note as well. Did you see New Orleans officially change their name?
Yeah, let's talk about that, please. Let's talk about that in 2 weeks. We can devote a whole show to that.
The Pelicans.
Yeah, that and much more. Hugo Fulco,
Wow.
Trevor Turner.
See ya.